Hey guys, this is Coach Mojica. I'm so excited to be teaching to y'all finally. I miss having each one of y'all in class. Hopefully this video helps a little bit. Just a little bit of information. If you are in Coach Deal's class or Coach Hartlaub's class, you can also use this video as we're all three doing the exact same quizzes this week. This video pertains to the week April 6th through April 10th. So if you just want to follow along, you can kind of learn what you need to do and what you can expect on your quizzes. So first off, this week is all about quadratic functions. So we're looking at parabolas, and today I'm going to teach y'all about the characteristics of a parabola. Let's go ahead and start with the vertex. So as you can see, I'm putting a point at the vertex right now. And I'm going to come right over here and label that vertex. The coordinates of that point are going to be 3, -1. To look at my coordinates, all I do is I come right over here, see where that point is, come right over here and see where this point is. I look at it, 3, -1, nice and simple. Okay, then let's go and look at that y-intercept, putting a point up here at that y-intercept. Our y-intercept is always going to have a value of 0 at the x, and then whatever the y-intercept is, which in this case it's going to be 8. So I have 0, 8. Next thing I'm looking at are my x-intercepts. In this one, I actually have 2 x-intercepts. I'm putting points at those. And if you look over here, I also have some different words for x-intercept. If you remember, in class, we learned about the acronym ROCKS, which stands for roots, zeros, x-intercept, and solutions. So on your quizzes this week, if you see any one of those words, you know exactly what it's asking for. It's always asking for your x-intercepts. As I'm writing in my x-intercepts, remember that the y value at every x-intercept is always going to be 0. Then I'm going to look at each one of these. Looking at both of these points right here, my first point is at 2 and my second point is at 4. So I'm going to go ahead and put those in. Okay, now let's determine if this is a maximum or a minimum. In my class, the way I teach this is I always tell my students, is this a mountain or is this a valley? And looking at this is definitely a valley. So I'm looking at a valley here. That means that I have a minimum. So just think about the Grand Canyon. The Grand Canyon has a low point, so it's going to have a minimum. That minimum is always going to be at the y of your vertex. So I simply write this as y equals -1. Okay, next thing, we're talking about our axis of symmetry. Let me go ahead and put a line through that axis of symmetry. Axis of symmetry has a hint letter in that word axis, and it's always going to be x. So x equals whatever the x of our vertex is. So I'm looking back at that vertex and I see x equals 3. So nice and simple. Next thing, domain. If you remember back in class, we always talk about the domain of our parabolas in Algebra 1 always being the exact same, and it's always going to be ARN. Hopefully you remember that ARN stands for all real numbers. And then lastly, our range. I'm going to start with a y because our range is always y values. And I'm going to look at the y of my vertex once again, which is -1. I'm going to leave a little bit of space, so I'm going to have y space -1. The way I determine which inequality is going to go in this space is I look at this parabola and I see that it's upward facing. That means that all of my y values are constantly going up. No matter what, they're going up in value. So my y values have to be greater than or equal to -1. Okay, so now that we've kind of mastered the characteristics of an upward-facing parabola, let's look at a downward-facing parabola. I'm not going to give you all the values on this one, but I am going to go through it just so you can see where each thing is. Once again, my vertex in this case. Next one is going to be my y-intercept. My zeros, my x-intercepts, my solutions, my roots, whichever term you're thinking of, whichever term you're using, whichever term you're asked. Okay. Then our next one, maximum, minimum. Okay, so in looking at this, am I looking at a mountain or a valley? And I'm definitely looking at a mountain, so this is going to be a maximum because I have a high point of every mountain. And once again, I have a y equals. And just a refresher, it's going to be y equals whatever our vertex y value is. So I'm looking right here, and that's going to be at y equals 4. Okay, and then our axis of symmetry. Remember, I'm going to draw that line directly through my vertex, see where it crosses on the x-axis. And that's going to be at x equals -3. Okay, domain, once again, domain for all of these is going to be the same. You're going to be looking at all real numbers each and every time. And then lastly, our range. So our range is going to be a little bit different here. I'm still looking at the y of the vertex, which we already determined was a 4. So I have y and a 4, but now I have a downward facing parabola. So if you notice, all of my y values are going down the entire time. I'm not going to have a y value greater than 4, which means range is going to be y is less than or equal to 4. All right, guys, so hopefully you learned something. You see what you need to do for this week's quizzes. Remember to subscribe to the YouTube channel because we're going to start having videos every single week. I hope y'all are staying safe during the quarantine. Me, Coach Deal, and Coach Hartlaub, we all miss y'all greatly. And as always, guys, it's a great day to be a Mustang. Miss y'all. Bye.